And look, a lot of discussion around Syracuse now, and I had to reach out to you. 49 and 48 in 3 seasons for Adrian Autry. Doesn't get it done. They don't go to the NCAA tournament in his time, and Syracuse is going to move on. What's your initial reaction to the news that Red Autry's out?
Not surprising. I think most that follow Syracuse had expected that to be the case, as kind of was obvious with the season going along um, that's kind of the way it was going to go. And ironically, after they won that game against SMU, they didn't win the rest of the year, and then SMU ends up getting revenge and ending the season. But I put this stat out shortly after the game ended last night that Syracuse beat Florida State early in the season, early in the ACC schedule, and improved to 12-5. And at that point, they had a resume that was, I would say bubble worthy. And they had the win over Tennessee, played Houston really tough without Donnie Freeman, who's considered their best player. But since that point, they went 3-12 in the last 15 games. And when you're at a place like Syracuse with the tradition you have and everything else, you mentioned that they didn't go to the tournament during his 3 years. They haven't been to the tournament since 2021. So it's been 5 years since they've been to March Madness. And when you put all of that together, it just wasn't enough. The fans were upset. Attendance was way down. You have to figure if he were to come back, that the NIL money wouldn't be there. So it's just a tough situation. He's a great guy by all accounts. I thought very highly of him as a person as well. I've always enjoyed my discussions with him. And, he's an alum, was a great player, longtime assistant coach. So when that guy fails, when he's one of your own, obviously it hits a little bit different.
And as Syracuse gets into this coaching search, it is going to be fascinating to see how it unfolds for them. Any hot names that are jumping out right at you? I know there's another former Syracuse team member that is getting all the kind of hype right now.
Yeah, Jerry McNamara at Siena is certainly going to be on the names to watch, and I think he's going to have multiple power conference opportunities for the job that he's done there, turning around a team that won 4 games a year before he got there. They win 14 in year 1. Year 2, they win the conference tournament and make the NCAA tournament. It's been quite a 2 years in terms of what he's been able to do there, but he's one of the names. I think some others that you'll hear are Brian Hodgson from South Florida, the South Florida head coach. He's done a really good job down there after doing a nice job at Arkansas State. Is formerly Nate Oates' top recruiting assistant at Alabama and at Buffalo. He was born in Olean, New York, so just a few hours from Syracuse. And the story goes that he did grow up a Syracuse fan. So if assuming all that is true, then you've got someone who understands what Syracuse basketball is supposed to be, and is not too far from where Syracuse is located in terms of family and friends and all that. I think Tony Skinn is an interesting name from George Mason. And, Gerard Calhoun from Utah State is kind of an interesting one. He's kind of a little bit more of an outside the box guy. Joe Gallo from Merrimack, the team that lost to Jerry McNamara in the MAAC conference championship game. He's an interesting one. He's been at Merrimack for a while, but is considered a good head coach and still only 46 years old. So could be interesting if he was looking to move up. And then just a couple of assistants at UConn. Luke Murray, who's the son of comedian and actor Bill Murray, is UConn's offensive coordinator and has been the offensive coordinator since, including during the 2 back-to-back national championship years. And then the associate head coach at UConn, Kamani Young. He's 52. He's been an assistant for 15, 16 years, something like that. At various spots, but has been attached to has been with Dan Hurley for quite a while. You wonder if he's going to be looking to be a head coach in his own right, and if now could be a potential time to explore that option.
And is there a sense around the athletic department? I mean, how the AD search is going and what that all is looking like and playing a factor into this one?
The NIL situation?
Or the AD.
Oh,
Isn't it?
The AD situation. Yeah. So with the AD situation, my understanding is that the call to move on from Autry was John Wildak's decision. I think they're close to making an announcement for who the new AD is going to be, and I think that new person will be the person that's leading the committee to make the decision on who the new head coach is going to be. That's my understanding of how that's going to play out. But certainly, when you have, they've had a change in the chancellor. The current AD announced his retirement effective July 1st. And so they currently have a committee together trying to find who the new AD is going to be. So when you have all of that as the backdrop, of course that complicates, this entire process. But I think they'll put a committee together. I'm sure they kind of already have an idea of who that committee is going to be comprised of, and they'll do a search, do their due diligence, and try to find the person that they think is the best fit for Syracuse.
You mentioned the NIL situation. I know it was a large focal point yesterday at the press conference post game with Adrian Autry, and probably has been a huge talking point up there among the media crew and the fan base. This is a historic job. This is one of the top uh, fan bases, top jobs in college basketball, and you should be able to kind of get whoever you want in a sense when a job like this opens. But in today's day and age of NIL, where does that piece stand, and how does Q's raise that money that is needed to not only try to be successful with Fran Brown leading the football team, but have Syracuse basketball back on the map?
Yeah, what's interesting is there was a report that came out that said that the roster this year, it took somewhere between $8 and $9 million to put together, and that was, I think, middle of the pack in the ACC. I think you can function on that if you have a coach that has been a winner and is a proven winner. That can certainly help you, but the report also said that was triple what they had the year before. And that means that Syracuse basketball was dealing with about $3 million of NIL money to put a roster together. And that's like back end of all power conference teams. That's really low on the totem pole and makes it very difficult for any coach. So I think the attractiveness of Syracuse as a job, as a head coaching position is there because of the brand, because of the history, as you mentioned. But any potential candidate that comes in, that's going to be the question that they're going to have answered in order for them to accept a job, which is, what is the NIL situation going to be, not only for next year, but for the foreseeable future, so that I make sure that we can put a competitive roster together every single year. Because what you don't want to do is be middle to back end of your conference year in and year out in NIL revenue. Syracuse needs to get up into the top, I don't know, 5 or 6 in the conference in NIL revenue, so that they can use that to put a roster together that will get them into a similar spot in the standings. That certainly is going to be a focal point, and I think all the donors internally are having discussions on which coaches they like, who they'd be willing to back, and all that's going to play a major role in how this search plays out as well.
And when you factor that backdrop in with the AD search, I mean, is there kind of that lead dog group of donors that wants to try to make this happen, that are picking up the ball and kind of running with it from what you're hearing up there?
So I've heard that there's some donors that back certain candidates, or have at least an early backing of certain candidates. But I know there's one donor, or it's a husband and a wife. A lot of the football facilities have been named after them. They're the Lally complex. John Lally, who's a former Syracuse football player, he and his wife are huge backers of athletics and the football program, and they contribute to other sports as well. But they haven't really done much with basketball. There's been a lot of discussion around them, mainly surrounding a guy that I mentioned earlier, Brian Hodgson, because they live in Florida, and the Lallies do, and they have season tickets to various South Florida sports, including basketball. And so they have a relationship with Brian Hodgson. So the theory was, if you get him, now you've got one of your top football donors that could potentially also give you some financial support in basketball, which could give you a big bump in terms of how much you have at your disposal from an NIL standpoint. Other than them and that sort of theory about how that could work, there hasn't really been any specific, this person wants this, or this person would give this to that, or anything like that. Nothing concrete. There's been some rumors about certain people backing potential candidates, but nothing concrete. I just know internally from what I've heard, there are some that have certain candidates that they like and had told the administration, if this guy is brought in, then I'm willing to continue to give what I have been, and or bump that up a little bit as well.
And just from a pure basketball perspective, where did it go wrong for Adrian Autry? What does the next head coach need to bring to the table for Q's?
Yeah, I think NIL is a part of it. I think he was put in a bad spot right from the start, and sort of set him up to fail in some respects, because they were so far behind in NIL, but other things around the program as well. Like, they just got a GM for the first time this offseason. So that would be something that should have been in place prior to that, right? And so having to go through 2 years of not having that, and putting them at a disadvantage compared to other programs. And then there's certain things from an X's and O's standpoint. You can look at substitution patterns and things like that. The offensive scheme has gotten a lot of comments from the Syracuse fans, claiming that they don't run any plays or anything like that. But that's a bit of hyperbole. That's a bit of overstating things. But their offensive system involves a lot of flow and a lot of feel, and it's sort of the longer you play together, then the better you get within that offense. And given the nature of modern college basketball, with so much roster turnover, so much more roster turnover than it used to be 10, 20, 30 years ago, it's a lot more difficult to run an offense that's based off of that, because you no longer have the players that sit for a couple of years and are going through all this stuff in practice and developing and etc. You no longer have players that play together for 2, 3, 4 years. It's almost like everything's a 1-year thing, and you've got so many moving pieces every single year, that having that cohesive unit of a junior and senior laden team that have played together for the last 2, 3 years, you don't really have that much anymore at this level, because players are moving so much, and it's impacted mid-majors as well, because when you have those good mid-major players, they're leaving a lot earlier to jump up to the high major level. So I think all of those factors certainly played a part in it. And Autry was also a first-time head coach, and there's a couple of things there, right? So sometimes coaches develop just like players do, and it's going to take some time before he becomes a really good head coach. It just like players, it takes some time to become a really good player. There's also the possibility that some people just aren't head coaches, right? We see this in every sport. Vic Fangio for my Philadelphia Eagles is an excellent defensive coordinator, was not a great head coach. And so that's just how some people are. They're great in those roles. And maybe that's what it is for Red. We'll see. I hope he gets another head coaching opportunity, because like I said, he's a great guy at some point, but he'll land on his feet somewhere. He's a great recruiter, very highly respected in terms of, what type of person he is. So I think he'll be okay. But ultimately, all of those factors are where it went wrong.
A couple more for you, and I want to switch gears and we'll get you out of here because I know you're busy, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about Fran Brown and how Syracuse is doing heading into spring ball in the near future. With I was super high on what Syracuse was doing. Steve Angeli gets hurt, the season falls apart, and they make a bunch of changes. It seems like on the coaching staff, there's all of this and that going on. I thought it was a little kind of like quick trigger to do that with losing like a franchise quarterback and the level he was playing. But nonetheless, just how is the Fran Brown era going from your vantage point, and is Steve Angeli on track to be back?
I think the plan is for Steve Angeli to be back. I haven't heard anything that said that there's been any type of setback for him. But it just kind of overall, as far as how things are with Fran Brown, I still think that he's got the support of the fan base, he's got the support of the donors, and all that. Um, but even though they made a lot of changes, most of them were on the defensive side of the ball. And even in year one, when they were good and they won 10 games, and we all know the Kyle McCord story and all that, the defense still had a lot of issues. And so I think this was more so of taking a look and saying, we're 2 years in, the defense isn't performing the way we want. We just had a really poor season. This is a good opportunity for me to sort of, make those changes now and try to get us back on track. So instead of having, a first-time defensive coordinator that was a buddy of his, he's bringing in someone who has been a defensive coordinator for several years and a successful one at Toledo. And then, they changed up a lot of their assistants as well that they think pretty highly of. And I think there's been a little bit of a shift from let's get the best recruiters in here that we can to, yeah, we still want guys to be good at recruiting, but putting more of an emphasis on X's and O's, player development, on the field schematically, things of that nature. So I think there's still some excitement about what they could be next year. The schedule is not quite as daunting with having, 4 or 5 college football playoff teams on your schedule, most of which were on the road. It's nice to not have that on your schedule, but they do still have Notre Dame coming to the Dome. I think fans are excited that if Angeli is back and healthy and playing like he did last year, that they'll have an opportunity to have a good bounce back year.
And last one, just the biggest things that you're watching in spring storylines wise for Syracuse.
I want to see what the other quarterbacks look like. There's been a lot of turnover in that room, and so we know that when you come back from an Achilles injury, you just never know how things are going to go, right? Because you could come back and be theoretically good to go physically, but it still takes time from a mental standpoint and everything else to really get back to 100%. And so if he's not ready to go and or has a re-injury, I want to see that they've got much better options behind him than what they did this past year. I know they thought that Ricky Collins was someone that could come in and play. That proved to not be the case. And then from there, it was sort of throwing darts at a dartboard and hoping something sticks, and it just never did. So they brought in a couple of guys from the transfer portal. They got a freshman that's coming in as well. They still have a couple of guys from last year back. I think they're hoping, that they've got a much deeper quarterback room. So I want to see how that plays out. And then I'm curious what the offensive line looks like. They got a new offensive line coach, Juan Castillo, who has a ton of experience at the NFL and collegiate level. Curious what he does with that offensive line group and if there's any change in terms of who we kind of expect to be the starters and, who he's looking at. And then I want to see how things work out defensively with a new scheme and a new coordinator, new position coaches all over the place. They brought in a lot of reinforcements, especially in the front seven. I want to see how all that looks and how guys look like they're adapting to a new defensive system.